Before they became famous movie stars, these men were real-life heroes. Long before the red carpets and bright lights, they were young soldiers in World War II, facing danger most of us can only imagine. Some flew planes through enemy fire, others risked their lives to save wounded friends, and a few went on secret missions still kept secret today. They fought in freezing cold, dodged bullets, and saw things that changed them forever. Later, Hollywood would cast them as heroes, villains, and charming gentlemen, but the truth is, they had already lived those roles for real. This is the story of the actors who went from the battlefield to the big screen. Number 1. The shadow behind the villain. Some actors pretend to have darkness. Others have lived through it. Before Christopher Lee became the face of Count Dracula and Saruman, he served in one of the most secretive branches of World War II, the Special Operations Executive. Tasked with espionage, sabotage, and aiding resistance fighters, his missions remain classified even today. When asked if he knew what it was like to stab a man in the back, Lee replied without hesitation, "Yes, I do." He rarely spoke of his service, protected by the Official Secrets Act, but admitted to seeing so many men die that it hardened him. Peter Jackson later revealed Lee was the only Lord of the Rings cast member who didn't need direction on how a man sounds when stabbed, because he'd heard it in real life. Lee didn't just play villains, he carried the weight of real war into every performance, making his on-screen menace all the more unforgettable. Number 2. The Landmine Comic. Some men survive war by grit, others by grit and a grin. Before Mel Brooks became the genius behind Blazing Saddles and The Producers, he was a 17-year-old U.S. Army combat engineer sent to Europe in World War II. His job, defusing landmines under freezing fire during the Battle of the Bulge, left no room for mistakes. Brooks joked later, "I was a combat engineer. Isn't that ridiculous? The two things I hate most are combat and engineering." But behind the punchline was the reality that one wrong move could have ended his life, as it did for many of his fellow engineers. Clearing paths for advancing troops taught him the value of timing, nerve, and finding light in the darkest places. That resilience followed him into comedy, where his wit and fearlessness broke rules just as boldly as he once crossed minefields. Every laugh he created was born from a man who'd already faced death and walked away, one careful step at a time. Number 3. The Bomber Gunner. Before Charlton Heston parted the Red Sea in the Ten Commandments or raced chariots in Ben-Hur, he was a 21-year-old braving a very different kind of epic. In 1944, Heston enlisted in the U.S. Army Air Forces, serving as a radio operator and aerial gunner aboard B-25 Mitchell bombers. Stationed in the remote Aleutian Islands of Alaska, he flew patrol and reconnaissance missions in brutal conditions: freezing winds, thick fog, and constant risk of enemy fire. His duties meant keeping the crew connected mid-flight and defending the aircraft from attack, all while the weather tried to tear the plane apart. Heston rarely spoke much about those years, but he credited the discipline, focus, and teamwork of military life for shaping the commanding presence that would define his acting career. From the skies over Alaska to the grandest stages of Hollywood, Heston carried the same steady resolve, the kind forged in a bomber's gunner's seat, with nothing but skill and grit between you and disaster. Number 4. The Signalman Who Saw History. Before Tony Curtis charmed audiences in Some Like It, Hot, and Spartacus, he was a 17-year-old from the Bronx answering the call to serve. Enlisting in the U.S. Navy in 1943, Curtis was assigned to the USS Proteus, a submarine tender that kept subs repaired and resupplied across the Pacific. As a signalman, he mastered Morse code and semaphore, a role that demanded sharp focus in high-pressure situations. His defining wartime moment came on September 2, 1945, when, from the deck of the Proteus anchored in Tokyo Bay, he watched the Japanese surrender aboard the USS Missouri. It was the day the Second World War officially ended, and Curtis had a front-row seat to history. After the war, he used the GI Bill to study acting, carrying with him the discipline and perspective forged in service. Beneath the Hollywood glamour was a man who had once stood witness to the very moment the world changed. Number 5. The crooner who survived the front lines. Before Tony Bennett became the smooth voice behind I Left My Heart in San Francisco, he was an 18-year-old infantryman in the U.S. Army, drafted in 1944 and sent to the front lines of France and Germany with the 63rd Infantry Division. He endured freezing winters, relentless combat, and staggering losses in the war's final months. But danger didn't only come from enemy fire, it came from within his own ranks. After having lunch with a black friend against his superior's racist orders, Bennett was demoted and reassigned to grave-digging duty, an act of injustice that left a lifelong mark. Following Germany's surrender, he joined the Special Services Unit and began singing for troops, the first step toward the career that would make him a legend. Bennett later said the war turned him into a lifelong pacifist and gave him an unshakable gratitude for every moment after. He didn't just survive the front lines, he carried its lessons into every note he ever sang. Number 6. The Marine who brought war to the screen. Before Lee Marvin became the gravel-voiced face of films like The Dirty Dozen and Point Blank, he was an 18-year-old Marine in the thick of the Pacific War. Enlisting in 1942, he served with the 4th Marine Division, one of the most battle-hardened units in the theater. In 1944, during the brutal Battle of Saipan, Marvin was cut down by machine gun fire, the rounds tearing through his sciatic nerve and lower back. The injuries ended his combat service and earned him a Purple Heart, a medal he wore quietly but with pride. The war left him with lasting pain and a hardened worldview, shaping the authenticity he brought to every grizzled role. He didn't glamorize violence because he had seen its reality. When Marvin played a soldier, audiences weren't just watching a performance, they were seeing a man who had already lived it. Number 7. The star who went back to war. By the time World War II erupted, David Niven was already a Hollywood leading man known for charm and sophistication. But instead of staying in the safety of California, he returned to Britain to rejoin the Army, where he had served before his acting career. Commissioned as a lieutenant in the Rifle Brigade, Niven later joined the elite British Commandos and was assigned to the ultra-secret Phantom Signals Unit. This small, specialized group slipped behind enemy lines, gathering intelligence and relaying critical battlefield information to headquarters, often while under direct enemy fire. Niven took part in the D-Day landings and fought through the European campaign, though much of his work remains classified. After the war, he never sought recognition for his service, speaking about it only rarely. When he returned to the screen in classics like Around the World in 80 Days and The Pink Panther, audiences saw elegance and wit. But beneath the tuxedos was a man who had risked everything for his country and carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had faced real danger and lived to tell no tales. Number 8. Scotty at war long before he became beloved as Montgomery. Scotty Scott in Star Trek, James Doohan was a decorated Canadian war veteran. Born in Vancouver, he joined the Royal Canadian Artillery during World War II and quickly proved himself a capable leader. On D-Day, Doohan landed on Juno Beach with the 3rd Canadian Infantry Division, navigating chaos under heavy fire. He led his men through a minefield and personally took out 2 German snipers. That night, however, disaster struck. A nervous Canadian sentry mistook him for the enemy and shot him 6 times. 4 bullets tore into his leg, 1 hit his chest but was stopped by a silver cigarette case, and 1 severed his right middle finger. Doohan survived, but the missing finger became a permanent reminder of the war. On screen, he cleverly hid it with camera angles and props, so most viewers never noticed. Though he rarely spoke about his service, he admitted that D-Day shaped him more than any role ever could. To Star Trek fans, Scotty was the miracle worker who kept the Enterprise running. In real life, James Doohan had already proved his courage, not in the stars, but on the bloody beaches of Normandy. Number 9. The Hero of Tarawa. Before audiences knew him as the genial Oliver Wendell Douglas on Green Acres, Eddie Albert was a decorated naval officer with a story straight out of a war movie. At the start of World War II, he served in the U.S. Coast Guard before transferring to the U.S. Navy, earning the rank of lieutenant. In November 1943, during the brutal Battle of Tarawa, Albert was piloting a landing craft under heavy Japanese fire when he spotted dozens of wounded Marines stranded in the surf. Ignoring direct orders to withdraw, he steered back into the kill zone again and again, dodging artillery and machine gun fire to haul the injured aboard. Over several hours, he rescued 70 men, making repeated trips through deadly waters. The feat remained largely unknown to the public for decades, but to those who served with him, it was unforgettable. For his valor, Albert received the Bronze Star with a Combat V. After the war, he returned to Hollywood, his easygoing charm masking the steel beneath. Eddie Albert wasn't just a sitcom star. He was a man who had risked everything for his fellow soldiers, proving that true heroism needs no spotlight. Number 10. From Bombardier to Beloved Curmudgeon. Before Walter Matthau made audiences laugh in The Odd Couple and Grumpy Old Men, he was flying dangerous combat missions over Nazi Germany. Born in New York City to a working-class family, Matthau enlisted in the U.S. Army Air Forces during World War II and was assigned to the 8th Air Force in Europe. Serving as a radio gunner on B-24 Liberator bombers, Matthau's job was twofold: maintain vital communication with base and man a machine gun to defend against enemy fighters. Missions meant braving sub-zero temperatures, flak bursts from anti-aircraft fire, and the constant threat of mechanical failure far from friendly territory. Matthau later admitted the flights could be terrifying, but like countless young airmen, he focused on the job at hand. After the war, he used the GI Bill to study acting, bringing to the stage and screen a dry wit and world-weary charm rooted in real-life experience. He never sought to glorify his service, but it quietly shaped his authenticity. Beneath the gruff humor, audiences could always sense the resilience of a man who had seen war and come home determined to make people smile.